think I've finally got the proper tail light cable for my Salsa Tributary e-bike. So that bike has a Bosch Performance Lines motor, which is the Generation 4. However, there are two different variations of Generation 4. There's the earlier version, which was based on the BES2, which is the Bosch e-bike system, BES. So the BES2 versus 3 basically refer to the whole system, the motor, the battery, the displays, the controllers, things like tail lights and headlights. So the BES2 was available on Generation 4 as well as Generation 3 and even some of the Generation 2. So I have this chart here. Yeah, we can take a look at this chart on the computer screen. It's a little easier to read, but you can see here, here's the connector, BES 1, 2, and 3. So like I say, we'll look at that later, but I wanted to show you the difference between the two connectors. So these are the tail light connectors, or basically a little pigtail that you connect up to the tail light wire. And it's just a 2-pin connector. It just has power and ground, and it plugs into the motor. But this is the BES2 motor connector, but it's kind of a squarish thing. There's 2 sockets in the middle, and the connector on the motor has 2 pins with basically a round recess that you plug this into. There's the waterproofing seal, and here's the BES3 connector, and it looks almost the same. It's just a little bit smaller, and it's red, and the connector on the motor is red for the tail light. The connector for the headlight is blue, and the headlight that I picked up came with the blue connector on it, and that connector plugged right in to the motor. So I don't know if Leasine has gone to the BES3 connector, if it's different. But here you can see, here's the two side by side, and they look very similar other than the color, and the size is just a bit different. If you put a pair of calipers on these, this one is roughly 6 millimeter diameter. This one is more like 5 millimeters, and it's a lot more round. So yeah, I had a hard time getting the right cable, because when I purchased the lupine tail light, they had an option for Bosch or Bosch BES3. I kind of assumed that BES3 was perhaps related to the Generation 5 motor. That's partly true, but it also relates to the Generation 4 motor. I think the change happened around 2022. So I purchased the Bosch connector, and then I had to order the BES3 connector. Okay, I found this table. This is off of the mountaintuning.com website. I'll put a link in the video description. Anyway, this page has some pretty good details on the different generations of the Bosch mid-drive e-bike motors. There's several things going on. You've got the different generations. The Generation 1, according to this table, was called the Classic, and then you had the Active Line, Performance Line, Active Line Plus, Performance Line, Performance CX, and then the Bosch Smart System. So those are somewhat related to the generations. And then over here, this is what's called the Bosch e-bike system, and then there's 1 through 3. That comes down to the whole system, the motor, the controller, the display, any sort of app support. And so there was BES1 that was used in Generation 1, and then BES2 was used all the way through Generation 4 with the Bosch Performance CX series. And then there's BES3 that became part of the Bosch Smart System Generation 4 and now Generation 5. And this BES1, 2, and 3 kind of affect what sort of plugs there are. And that's where things got confusing, because I have the Bosch Performance CX motor in my e-bike, but it turns out it's a Bosch Smart System Generation 4 motor that happens to be a Performance CX motor, but it has, as it turns out, the BES3 system. So supposedly this change took place around 2022, and the problem is some vendors will just say it's a Bosch taillight connector, and others will say, oh, it's a Bosch Smart System taillight connector, and others will actually clearly state it's a BES3 connector. So you have to watch for that, because you might need the BES3 connector if you have a newer motor. And I've yet to find a chart or a table that lists every single difference. But this one at least mentions a BES2 connector. And I guess the Smart System, I think that means that it works with the Bosch Flow app. I'm not certain on that, but that's my understanding, is the Smart System. Part of that is the Bosch Flow app, Bluetooth support, and all that sort of thing. The Intuvia 100 is a Bluetooth display, as is the remote. So yeah, it's quite confusing, but hopefully this chart will help make a little bit of sense trying to figure out what you have. So earlier I showed you the two different connectors. We can go look at the motor on the e-bike, and I'll show you why they're different.